The first assumption is that each life begins with a blank slate and all behavior comes from interactions with our environment. The other assumption is that we learn everything through social learning, operant conditioning, and classical conditioning.
This is a study of Fagin.
In 2011, the Nepal government introduced the annual TB testing in elephants. The aim of Fagin is to investigate whether secondary positive reinforcements could be used to train the elephants to voluntarily complete a trunk wash.
The method in Fagin et al. Is controlled observation because this takes place where the elephants were chained in stalls and it was structured because they also use a behavioral checklist.
What's the sample of the study?
The sample consists of 5 female elephants, 4 juveniles, 5 through 7, 1 adult, which is 50 years old. They were all tame and none were pregnant.
Procedure of the study, the elephants were trained from 7:30 to 10 a.m. or from 4 to 7.
Trunk up. Bucket. Steady.
The training was done using
First technique was capturing, where animals were rewarded with different treats if they perform well, for example, for humans, money.
After learning the 5 behaviors, they were paired with verbal cues. After cue was given, the elephants were encouraged to behave a certain way.
The dependent variables were the minutes from training the elephants were offered from the first cue compared to the last, the number of cues made by the trainer, and the success of each behavior. Elephant 2 and 4 failed the study test, and Elephant 5 never passed below desensitization or study test.
One conclusion is that the juvenile free contact, traditionally trained elephants can be trained to participate in a trunk wash using secondary positive reinforcement techniques. Another conclusion is that secondary positive reinforcement can happen with voluntary participation and no punishment. For Fagin, a strength was standardization along with ecological validity. A weakness was generalizability, which was represented through a smaller sample size and the participant variables.
This is the study of Saavedra and Silverman.
This is the psychology investigated in the study. Classical conditioning is learning through association. Evaluative learning is a type of classical conditioning where a neutral stimulus is paired with something a person finds disgusting. Here's the aims of the study.
One of the aims of the study is to highlight the role of evaluative learning and discuss in the development of treatment in children's phobia. Another aim would be to test the efficiency of imagery exposure therapy as part of an exposure-based cognitive behavioral treatment for a specific phobia of buttons.
Here's the method of the study.
This is a longitudinal case study which uses qualitative and quantitative data along with interviews, questionnaires, and observations. The sample of the study consists of a 9-year-old Hispanic American boy from Florida. His mom brought him to the FIU in Miami to seek treatment for his phobia of buttons. He had been living with the phobia for 4 years with no other disorders.
Here's the procedure of the study.
To start off, the mom and boy were interviewed, being asked questions about the phobia.
And then I went to this vest, and the vest had buttons all over it
Researchers
too.
used a feelings thermometer and through 4 50-minute sessions, 30 minutes alone, then 30 minutes with the mom. The boy then experienced in vivo exposure, where he was exposed to buttons. If he was able to tolerate it, his mom rewarded him. The boy then went through 7 sessions of imagery exposure therapy. They gradually worked their way up to clear buttons.
How did you feel about the buttons?
The boy was then interviewed immediately after treatment.
6 months later!
Then 6 months later,
12 months later!
and again 12 months later.
After behavioral exposure therapy, the boy could physically tolerate more buttons but reported higher distress rating. After imagery exposure therapy, his distress rating decreased. And the conclusion is that imagery exposure therapy may be more effective treatment for disgust-based treatment.
A strength for Silverman was standardization by using the feelings thermometer. Another was internal validity with a longitudinal design. A weakness is demand characteristics, since the boy knew of the aim. Another would be ethics, since they broke protection from psychological harm, confidentiality, and potentially valid consent.
This is the study of Bandura.
This is the psychology investigated. Social learning. Social learning is when you learn a new behavior by observing through a role model and then later imitating the behavior later on without a model. Another was aggression. This is when the intention is to harm another person or object.
Bandura is a lab experiment using matched pairs design. The sample consists of 72 children between the ages of 3 and 6.
Here's the procedure of the study.
Stage 1 consisted of a play area. For the aggressive kids, the model played with the Tinker Toys for 1 minute, then attacked the Bubble Doll for 9. For the non-aggressive, the model assembled the Tinker Toys for 10 minutes. For control, there was no model and the kids played for 10 minutes. Stage 2 was where children were mildly annoyed to provoke their aggression. They were told they could not play with the toys. In Stage 3, kids were observed by the male model through a one-way mirror for 20 minutes while they played with the toys of their choice.
One strength from Bandura was standardization. This was done by keeping the procedure the exact same for every participant. Strength 2 is the inter-rater reliability, which was demonstrated with the matched pairs. However, a weakness is generalizability. They focused on a smaller sample size where they were all rich. Another was the ethics.
By observing an aggressive model, it can lead to imitative aggression in the observer. Another conclusion was that the boys are more likely to imitate same-sex models than girls.
The results were that the girls spent more time playing with dolls and tea sets and coloring compared to the boys, and that the boys spent more time playing with guns than girls.